Hello. This presentation explains how we will calculate degrees from summer 2017. The guidance in this presentation applies to all students who expect to graduate from July 2017 onwards, except those students who are taking BA QTS. If you're taking BA QTS, you will need to consult a different guide. In this presentation, I will answer the following questions. First of all, I'll explain how your marks relate to degree classes. Then I'll go through the stages we use to calculate your degree. Then I'll answer a couple of questions that you may have about your classifications. And finally, I'll let you know how to find more information. So, relating your marks to degree classes, the table on this slide shows how the grades and marks you obtain relate to degree classifications. So an A+ or an A, or you may get a mark somewhere between 70 and 100, that means you're working at first class honours standard. If you get a B or a B+, or a mark between 60 or 69, that means that you're working at upper second class honours standard. If you get a C or a C+, or a mark between 50 and 59, that means you're working at lower second class honours standard. And if you get a grade E or D, or a mark of 40 to 49, this means you're working at third class honours standard. If you're really consistent and all your marks are in one of those categories, then that's the degree you'll get. If all your marks are between 70 and 100, you will get the first class honours. However, most students aren't quite so consistent, and so the rest of this presentation explains how we will proceed. You'll see from this slide that we have 4 stages, and we will in all cases use the first 3, and if necessary we'll go on to the 4th stage as well. In the first stage we will calculate your overall aggregate mark, and we'll do this by using 2 methods. The second stage we will look at those 2 marks and decide which one gives you the higher overall aggregate. And then thirdly, we will look at your general profile of marks. With any luck, this will give a clear outcome. If not, we will go to stage D, where we'll look at your profile of marks in more detail. So, we look at stage A first of all. What we'll do here is use 2 methods to calculate your overall aggregate mark. The first method takes into account work from all levels of study, level C, level I, and level H. And here we will take 10% of your level C mark, 30% of your level I mark, and 60% of your level H mark, and add them together. In method 2, we will just look at your work from levels I and H. We will take your level I mark and multiply it by 25%, and then we'll take your level H mark times 75%. So we've got an example on the screen there. If we assume this student got 55 on average from level C, 62 on average from level I, and 75 on average from level H, by method 1, this student ends up with an aggregate of 69.1. By method 2, the student ends up with an aggregate of 71.8. So moving on to stage B. We will then look at these and decide which method gives you the higher overall aggregate mark. And this is very simple. We will just select the higher of the 2 aggregates obtained in stage A. So for student 1, which is the same student that we spoke about before, method 1 gave a mark of 69.1, method 2 a mark of 71.8. So 71.8 is the higher aggregate mark. Student 2, method 1 gave 66.6, method 2 gives 64.8. This time method 1 gives the highest, and so we will select 66.6 as the higher aggregate mark. That brings us to stage C. And what we'll do here is to look at your overall profile. And here we will take the following 3 marks. First, your higher overall aggregate that we've calculated in the previous slide. Secondly, your aggregate mark from level H. And thirdly, your level H research mark. Now, what this is will depend upon your course. In many cases, it will be your dissertation mark. However, some of you, instead of taking a dissertation, will have taken 2 research projects, in which case the level H research mark is the average of your marks for the 2 research projects. So this will give us 3 marks. If the 3 marks are in the same class, you will be awarded that classification. So if all 3 marks are in the first class band, you will get a first class honours degree and we will proceed no further. However, if the 3 marks are not all in the same class, we will then look at your profile in more detail in stage D. So let's have a look at some examples of stage C. First of all, we have a single honours student taking BA History. So we've calculated the overall aggregate in 2 ways. Method 1 gave 67, method 2 gave 71. So therefore the higher overall aggregate is 71. This student's aggregate mark from level H is 78. And the student did a dissertation and that was awarded 85. So the level H research mark is 85. Now all 3 marks, 71, 78 and 85 are all above 70. So this student will get a first class honours degree. Second example, student taking English literature. So we've got the 2 overall aggregate marks. This time the first method gave 69, the second method gave 68. So we select 69 as the higher overall aggregate mark. The student got 68 as the aggregate mark from level H. Again, they did a dissertation. That was awarded 68 as well. So the level H research mark was 68. So we have 69, 68 and 68. Those 3 marks are all between 60 and 69, so this student will get an upper second class honours degree. For the third example, we have again 2 overall aggregate marks, 69 and 70. So we take 70 as the higher overall aggregate mark. The student gained 68 on aggregate from level H. And the student did a dissertation, which was also awarded 68. So 68 is the level H research mark. Now in this case, 1 mark is 70 in the first class band, but 2 of the marks are between 60 and 69. So in this case, we will consider the student's profile in more detail in stage D. The fourth example, we have a student taking a combined honours or double major degree in history and politics. So in terms of the overall mark, again we have 2 overall aggregate marks, 59 and 61. So we select 61 as the higher overall aggregate mark. And note in this case, of course, that the student was taking both history and politics. So in order to calculate these marks, we take the average of their mark for history and their mark for politics. At level H, we have the aggregate mark of 63. And again, that is the average of their mark for history, which was 69, and politics, which was 57. This time, as a combined honours or double major student, instead of doing a single dissertation, the student did 2 research projects, one for history and one for politics. The student gained 68 for the history project, 58 for the politics project. So taking the average of 68 and 58, we have 63. So this student's level 8 research mark is 63. So the 3 marks are 61, 63 and 63. These marks are all between 60 and 69, so this student will get an upper second class honours degree. And example 5, we have another student taking history and politics as a combined honours degree. In this case, again, we've got 2 overall aggregate marks, 70 and 69. So we take 70 as the higher overall aggregate mark. The student was given 69 for the aggregate mark in level H, and you'll see that that is 69 is based as the average of 72 and 66, the marks from history and politics. This student, instead of doing two separate research projects, did an integrated dissertation combining history and politics together. That dissertation was given 74, so the level H research mark is 74. So we now have 3 marks, 70, 69 and 74. This student's marks comprise 2 marks in the first class 70 plus band, but 1 mark is between 60 and 69. So this student's profile will be considered in more detail in stage D. So here we have stage D when we look at your detailed profile of marks. In this stage, the Board of Examiners will scrutinise your transcript and it will form a judgment about the most appropriate classification for you. Now, the board can exercise its discretion in reaching a decision, but it is expected to follow guidelines agreed by the university. And on this slide and the next slide, I've shown the gist of 5 of these guidelines. First of all, the board will only focus on the quality of your work. It will not take into account any mitigating circumstances. It will simply look at the quality of the work that you've submitted as represented by the marks. Secondly, the board will take into account whether your marks were in the high or low part of a classification band. And we've put an indication of what that means on the slide. So 86 to 100 is in the high part of the first class band, 60 to 64 is in the low part of the upper second band, and so on. Thirdly, we will look in particular on whether you reach the high or low part of a band in 3 areas. First of all, for your higher overall aggregate mark. Secondly, for at least 50% of the work you did for level H. And finally, for your level H research mark. Fourthly, the board will consider whether you passed assessments at the first attempt. Please be clear that the board will not adjust your classification on the basis of reaching a higher class in your dissertation, for example, if you had initially failed the dissertation and your good mark came from the resubmission. So we are looking at the marks you obtained at the first attempt. Fifthly, I wanted to emphasize that if you are doing a double major degree or a combined honours degree where you have 2 subjects, the board will focus on your average performance across your studies. There is no expectation that you must perform equally well in both majors, and if you do 2 research projects, there is no expectation that you must perform equally well in both projects. So that's the degree classification procedures in a nutshell. You may have, however, a few questions. One question you may have is, well, what if you entered Liverpool Hope after the start of level C? What would we do then with method 1? Well, if you were granted exemption from part of level C, then basically we would proceed in the normal way. But when we calculate your aggregate mark from level C for method 1, we'll base that totally on assessments you did at this university. On the other hand, if you were granted exemption from all of level C, then clearly there are no level C marks to be taken into account. Therefore, in method 1, your first overall aggregate mark will be based on your marks from level I and level H, and you will give a 40% weighting to level I and a 60% weighting to level H. Method 2 will proceed as normal. You also may have questions relating to whether you passed all your assessments. So there's a number of scenarios we've covered here. What happens if you fail one or more assessments this year? What if you simply don't submit one or more assessments? What if you are not fit to do a level H assessment? And what if you are allowed to redeem during level H a failure or non-submission from an earlier level of study? And there's one slide about each of these scenarios. So if you fail one or more assessments, well, if you pass your sublets on aggregate and you pass your dissertation and research projects, and all your marks are 35 or higher, then normally you will be deemed to have passed your degree. You will not have a resit opportunity. You will be awarded a degree based on the marks you have obtained. If you get a mark of less than 40 for a coursework assessment, then your tutors will normally allow you to represent it before June to try to raise the mark to 40. And this will still count as an initial attempt. If your aggregate mark for level H is below 40, or if you fail a dissertation or research project, or any other mark or any other assessment which have been identified by your department as a qualifying component, which means it's a component you have to get a mark of 40 for, or if you've still got a mark of less than 35 by June, then you will not be able to graduate with honours in July. The board will look at your options. They might include graduating without honours, resitting in August, retaking all or part of your level with attendance, or finishing your studies without taking your degree. The board will consider your options and you will get an indication of what you are expected to do in the results. So, what if you simply don't submit one or more assessments of level H? Well, if you don't submit one or more assessments, you will not be eligible to graduate in July. The examiners will consider your options, which might include resubmitting assessments in August, but this would only be possible if your aggregate marks were 25 or higher. Or they might give you the opportunity to apply to retake all or part of FLH with attendance. Or they might require you to finish your studies without taking a degree. I do want to emphasize that not submitting work is never a good idea. If you're not fit to do an assessment, it's really important to follow the advice in the next slide. And basically, if you miss an assessment due to approved mitigating circumstances, you will normally be entitled to undertake the assessment later with no penalty. So it is absolutely essential to submit evidence of your circumstances to explain your absence from an exam, and if you are unable for good reasons to submit coursework on time, you must seek an extension. And there's a big warning in red that if, without letting the university know why, you do not do an assessment or you hand it in late, your degree is at risk. Occasionally, students might be given an opportunity to make good a failure from an earlier level during level H. And it's important to remember that your degree will not be calculated and you will not be able to graduate until you've either passed that assessment or gained at least a mark of 35 for the assessment, or a mark of 40 if it was a qualifying component. So please, if you were allowed to progress whilst completing work from an earlier level, don't forget about that outstanding work if you wish to graduate in July. That's basically the end of the presentation, but this final slide gives an indication of where you can find more information. I hope you found this very helpful, and best of luck with the rest of your studies.